Welcome to CX Wise, where we share wisdom, insights, stories, and expertise from the world of customer experience. Hi, I'm your host, Nathan Bennett, and you're about to hear real-world experiences and practical advice that will elevate your CX game no matter your title, no matter your industry. So, without further ado, let's get wise. My guest today is Jeff Sheehan, a renowned CX influencer, author, and seasoned consultant with an impressive track record of over 25 years in the industry. Working for the U.S. Army, Motorola, Apple, Jeff draws from his experience in leadership, customer strategy, sales, and support operations. Jeff currently heads CXJS Consulting, where he helps companies improve their CX maturity and ROI. He is recognized as a thought leader by CX Magazine and Thinkers360. From dutifully serving his country and community to now dedicating himself to the needs of his customers, Jeff's life stands as a testament to the profound impact of service. Jeff, you are what our program is all about, so welcome to CX Wise. How are you today, man?
I'm terrific, Nate. Thank you very much for that very generous, kind introduction. I appreciate it.
All facts, man. All facts. Well, first, let's start out by talking about some definitions so we're all on the same page. So, Jeff, how do you define customer experience, first of all, and then how does that inform customer experience management?
Right, and I appreciate the distinction between the two, right? Customer experience is what you and I as consumers actually go through. The way I like to say it is how we interact with a brand in a way that makes us loyal enough or interested enough to purchase from those brands that we interact with. A customer experience is our human journey with those interactions, whether they're digital or real life. Like, I've been a customer at my credit union since 1986. So, there's folks who just transact one time and you never do business again. And then there's folks who are loyal for literally a lifetime. And that would be, I think, a customer experience. Customer experience management is more of a business operation, right? A function like HR or IT or legal or accounts receivable. Customer experience management is a function that should overarch and bring an outside view into the company to help the company understand how customers want to be treated. What do customers value that we should do more of? What are customers irritated by that we should do less of? Where is the friction? Because every organization, a business, I'd say, has P&Ls, which create sort of real silos. There's data that some parts of the organization has that other parts may not have. And that data might, when you pull it together, give you a more comprehensive perspective on the customer. So customer experience management is that sort of overarching outside-in perspective to a business operation to really understand what to do to get customers to transact more or to stick around longer, and to eliminate the reasons why they would go away, why they would abandon a shopping cart online, for example, or why they would come to your branch, but they wouldn't open a loan with your branch or apply for a credit card with your bank and so forth. So I think broadly, customer experience management is that business operation inside an organization, and customer experience is that external, what actual customers, whether they're consumers or other businesses, go through to do business with you.
Now, your background is one of the more fascinating ones that I've heard of, especially in this space. I mean, you spent a decade as a military officer in the Army and a helicopter pilot. So how did you get from that experience to being one of the most renowned voices in customer experience management? And what's the connection there for you? How did that evolution happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. I ponder every once in a while myself. And I love this quote from Steve Jobs. Jobs said something to the effect of, there's all these points in your life of experiences that seldom make sense in the moment that you're experiencing them. But it takes some perspective to look back and see how they are connected, right? And I think anyone of a certain age has enough dots on their map, on their life journey, to look back and say, okay, well, I'm here today by way of a marriage, of a job that moved me here and so forth. And it was the same for me. I was in the Army until 1995 when the Cold War was over and the Army was going through its own upheaval, I guess, more than a transformation. And so I was caught up in that, and I decided I was going to leave the military. And at the time, I worked with a recruiter who brought me into the company corporate world that I knew nothing about. I didn't know how to translate my military background into civilian terms. But I found a recruiter. They helped me with that, and I landed a job with AT&T's computer company, which is called Global Information Solutions at the time. And they actually had a very active program to recruit junior military officers and sort of build a new cohort of leadership inside their service organization. And then a year later, the company split into three companies, AT&T, Lucent, and NCR Corporation. I stayed with NCR in their worldwide customer service group. And I stayed there for 10 years. So to answer your question, it was by virtue of this program looking for folks like me. But the other part of your question is I discovered that I had the right attitude and aptitude for customer service. And that's the parallel, really. The military is all about service. And I would say, to your point as a helicopter pilot, I had customers. So if I needed to deliver people, VIPs or infantry scouts to go somewhere, those people were my customers. I had to serve them and support the job that they were to do. You have to fix your equipment. You have to have technology in order to do your equipment. You have to have the people with the right skills to use that technology to do the job. And so you pull back the camouflage and the weaponry and things like that. You see so much more in common with military service and customer service than meets the eye.
It occurs to me in conversations that you and I have had before, if all's going well, it seems like the pilot is maybe not doing a lot physically because everything's going pretty well from the outside, right? When we talk about customer experience management, if things are going well, it looks like it's fairly simple. However, there's a lot going on in that pilot's brain and in their concentration. Under that stillness while they're flying, there's a lot going on underneath the surface. And I'm wondering if there's a parallel between a well-run customer experience management system or program within a brand.
Yeah, I think there is. And helicopters are a unique kind of machine in that there's thousands of parts all trying to fly away. Right. Mm-hmm. And I flew an aircraft called a Huey, a UH-1 Huey. And at the top of the mast, just above the main rotor, is this one big bolt. We called it the Jesus nut because if that thing came off, the rotor comes off and gravity takes over at that point. But it's a very dynamic environment in an aircraft, particularly a helicopter where you've got thousands of moving parts moving at different speeds and so forth. And then you got what goes on in the cockpit where it's a relatively confined space. And you would look at it and see these guys and think of, oh, they're working really hard. But there's a lot of mental work, right? You're reading a map. You're listening and interacting with the radios. You're interacting with airspace management. You're managing time. You're managing fuel. You're managing safety with looking for wires and other aircraft and birds. So it's not the same thing as shoveling to dig a ditch or construction maybe, but there's quite a bit of work going on. And I would say that parallels what customer experience leaders do. It's a very dynamic environment. If you emphasize one thing here, it might change things in other areas. Like I think of a water balloon when I say that. You've got different constituencies that you have to serve, and their needs are oftentimes more urgent or important, or both, than what you think should be done. And so you have to sort of adapt to supporting them as your customer, let's say, just like you would as a passenger. I've flown VIPs that tap you on the shoulder and you turn around and over the intercom, they tell you, we're not going there. We're going to go here. And that changes the mission instantly. And that's what you do. And business, of course, is very much like that. So there is a sort of dynamic, things affect other things. And with a helicopter, for example, you've got a cyclic control, you've got a collective control, you've got two pedals. And if you move any one of those controls, it changes the other dynamics. So I think CX has a lot of that. If you're going to pursue cost reduction, it's at the cost of something else. You know what I mean? And I think that's what a lot of CX leaders try to do, is try to do everything really, really well. And what I advocate for is pick your targets, which are consistent with the business objectives and the brand promises and the mission, vision, values, and focus on those things that are going to fulfill what the business is in business for. And of course, listen to your customers, adjust based on that feedback, and just remove a step of friction from a process you make the customer go through.
That's interesting, removing a step of friction and irritation. I think you often mention that doing more of what customers value and less of what irritates them is the mission of customer experience management. And you've also had some interesting perspectives on the misuse of NPS in businesses and brands. So what are the effective techniques businesses can actually use to continuously gather feedback from customers to identify those areas of friction that might be irritating them? If it's not NPS, or if businesses are misusing NPS, what should we be doing instead?
Wow. There's a lot in your question. So let me start with NPS. I have seen customer experience jobs posted, even chief customer officer jobs, where the role was prescribed to be moving the needle on an NPS benchmark.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we want to be this number and we want to improve that number. And I don't agree with that whatsoever. I don't think that's healthy for customers or the business. I just yesterday filled out a survey, and it's rare that I do because it was a terrible survey. It was too long. But like in the first 5 questions was, would you recommend this to friends and family? And it was for health benefits. And I said no. And my feedback in the text box was, I never talked to anybody about health benefits. Like that's an NPS question, pure and simple. And it has no bearing in the real world. I think a better question would be, given all the choices you have, would you hire us again? Would you buy from us again? Would you come back? I think that's a better question than the NPS question. I've used a mobile app to rent a car. Like I haven't driven it yet, haven't picked it up, haven't returned it, haven't had the whole experience yet. And they're asking me if I would recommend the business to friends and family. I'm like, it's an absurd question at that point in time. But yeah, you mentioned value and irritant, and that may be an oversimplification, but it keeps things focused, right? If you want to do more of what customers value so that they stay your customer, and what do they value? If you're a fast food restaurant, are you fast? Are you courteous? Are you clean? Is the quality of your food worthwhile? And you can debate that. It's a matter of taste, maybe, for is it McDonald's or Burger King or whatever. But are you what you say you are? Because you're setting expectations. And you'll know from your customer feedback, which you collect, whether you want to or not. Customers will feed back to you. That's where you're going to find an understanding of what they value and what irritates them. And one of the things that irritates me is when I dealt with my mortgage company and they sent me a pre-conversation survey. I didn't do it because it asked 3 pages of questions, many of which they should have already known about me, like my name and my address. I bought my house through them, so they should know my name and my address. And there's a lot of personal questions without any context for why. What were you going to do? Who's going to read this? So I just blew it off. And the person I spoke to, lovely guy, one of the first comments he made to me was, I noticed you didn't do it. It's like, yeah, you guys were way too intrusive and with no point. Like it sounded like I was doing your homework to help you. And I didn't see any connection to what I need. And you didn't ask me what I needed. You kept asking me your questions.
So how did he respond to that? Did he have had anything to say?
Yeah, he did. He's a really charming guy. He's very professional. He knows his business well. He said, yeah, we hear that a lot. I'm like, oh, okay, well,
so what are you doing?
Maybe you want to get rid of that and protect your reputation as easy to do business with, save time, not annoy, not irritate a customer, right. Those kind of things. And businesses do this all the time, right? They ask you 14 questions when 7 would be just fine. When you're on the phone waiting, they tell you you're next, but they don't tell you that it's going to take 17 minutes to be next. Right. If they tell you an agent will be with you in 4 minutes, that's much more useful to me than you're next. And it's little things. There's so many little things that you can do to remove irritants. And what gets in the way? What inhibits that? Well, usually it's an inside-out perspective. You're sitting at the table inside your company at a meeting, and somebody's defending the irritation in your process. Right? Oh, we need that. Compliance needs that. We have to ask that. Oh, we've always asked that. And that's really hard work for a CX leader to bust through that cultural issue, the compliance, legal, I call it squid ink. They feel threatened, so they throw that ink out there in the water to keep you from bugging them to do work or to challenge. And yet that's important to do as a CX leader, is to advocate for your customers for the benefit of the business as well. And look at those things that are irritants and really challenge them. And not just that, but develop ways to do it differently, do it better, and then to prove that the business would benefit. If I can prove to you that taking a 14-question application down to 7 questions will convert to more applications for credit cards, let's say, and so I'll have more credit card transactions, that's a pretty compelling story for a CX leader, rather than just saying, well, if we do this, the NPS score could go up 2 points. So,
it's interesting. Like, I feel like what you're talking about largely is building trust. When you were filling out this 3-page form for this mortgage company that should already know you, the suspicion goes up. Why do you need this? Why don't you already have it? I'm wondering if you see the introduction of new tools like generative AI, do the possibilities of the application of those tools heighten the level of trust, or do they make customers a little bit more suspicious? Is it creepy, or can it be helpful?
Well, it could be both. So we look at like personalization, for example, where companies can, in a very clever way, use technology to collect all the things they know about you and feed it back to you in a useful way, right? So I got a coupon packet in the mail the other day, and then a package in the mail. It was formula for babies with my name on it. And I'm like, I don't know who thinks I'm pregnant, but I got a box of baby formula in the mail, right? So personalization didn't work in that case because A, I'm a dude, I can't get pregnant, and B, there's no babies in my household. But some clever marketing somebody sent me baby formula. And there's other personalization where they can know too much. It can be a little creepy. We all know the story, right? You go searching for, let's say, power tools because you want to do a project at home. And you're looking at a bunch of websites, you're talking to Alexa or Siri, and you're doing your research. And then you go to your Facebook page or your Instagram account, and you start seeing the advertisements for power tools, right? And you're like, oh, geez, this seems kind of odd that I was just. So some people could think that's kind of creepy. But then there's programs like loyalty programs and customer programs where you opt in. And this doesn't happen to me, but I have a friend who is in like a premium customer program with Cabela's or Bass Pro fishing shops. And his card has a chip in it that when he goes in the store and there's sensors, it's like an RFID system that detects his card in his wallet, and his phone will start to buzz with, "Welcome back, Jeff. Hey, we have kayaks on sale," because he was looking at kayaks on their catalog. And so there's that kind of personalization and knowledge about you that you can opt into, and it can be quite effective, but that's a mindful choice by a customer to allow that.
They're willfully entering into that agreement.
Yeah. And with AI, I mean, a lot of customer experience management platforms and customer feedback management platforms have an AI technology of some sort built in so they can parse out emotional content from voice, or they can produce transcripts and text and then parse, relationships between emotion and offering a channel. And you can then use it to detect customer churn or customers ready to buy something. And I think we're getting into that area of AI where agents and websites and chatbots are now going to be more aware of the next step, right? So if I'm going to your website and I interact with the chatbot, for example, and in the technology's wisdom, it realizes that most people who behave the way I'm behaving on the chatbot are looking for this. And this other product goes with that product. Oh, and if I can find out that you're a veteran, maybe there's a veteran discount that is the last straw, so to speak, that lets me buy. And even there's the technology that can detect you're on the website, you're building up a shopping cart, but you're about to leave. And that can trigger a human intervention where somebody comes back online and says, "Hi, this is Jeff. Is there anything I can help you with? Because it looks like you're going to buy a bunch of stuff for your pool. What can I do for you?" And it's kind of that human intervention triggered by a piece of technology that has enough insight based on the huge amount of data that it collects that if people are behaving this way, the next step is likely to be, something here. And so we're seeing a lot of that and how to apply that. And I think that will be the balance between creepy and useful. Will be a real tightrope for companies to walk as it is. My mother is 83 and doesn't trust technology at all. And if she thinks you know too much about her, that freaks her out, and she will stop right in the moment.
My parents
Stop.
are the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. And so a long answer to your question, but I think you had several questions in there. I think that's going to be the next level of interaction between businesses and customers, whether they're B2B or B2C, is how well do you know me? Can you anticipate? If I'm a B2B provider, I can look at your order history and I can tell that right about middle of August, you're going to place an order for 500 units, and I can just send to you, the customer, an email that says, "Anticipating this order, can we place it, or do you want to modify it?" and just kind of do part of your job for you as a help. I think that's where technology can be very, very helpful.
It's so funny. Sometimes I'm a little annoyed. There is that creepy factor that you don't want to sort of cross the line if you're a brand or a business. But then sometimes I'm so conditioned to have businesses or brands that I interact with all the time. I'm so conditioned, and my expectation is that they do know me, that they should be anticipating my needs and how I'd like to interact with them and when I'd like to interact with them, so that when I interact with a brand that doesn't do that effectively, I'm kind of annoyed by that. Whereas I might have been creeped out initially at how well someone's AI might know me or not. Isn't it interesting how we become and we grow conditioned to sort of expect it?
Well, it is very interesting because we're always people. And so we have this sort of fickle, I want easy, I want frictionless, I want you to take what you already know about me and put it to use so I don't have to keep telling you, right? Because I want to feel like my loyalty to you should be reciprocated. You should at least give me back the recognition that I'm your customer after being your customer for so long. But we're also, as people, like, well, I don't want you to know too much about me. It's kind of like the person in the middle seat of your flight. You know you're going to have to talk to them, but you don't want to tell them your whole life story, and you don't want to hear their whole life story, probably. And then again, maybe you do. But there's a bit of that sort of balance of human interaction and respect and loyalty and humanity, but just enough to get that cup of coffee and then bugger off. You know, I'm glad you know my name. I see you every day on my way in and out of the work and stuff, but it should be a pleasant transaction. Mm-hmm. And then you go into a medical office setting, for example, and you're treated like a nuisance by some people. I mean, just the courtesy just isn't there. And you'd expect in a medical profession, it's so personal, right? I mean, deeply personal, right? And you have rude people who are hiding behind glass to meet the HIPAA requirements and using that as an excuse to just not deal with you. And I've experienced that. And that's not what I expected when I went to my doctor's office, right? I expected more courtesy than I got at the coffee shop, but that's not what happened. So there is that sort of contextual expectation, the reasonableness, the unreasonableness of people, and then the level of customer-oriented culture that you're interacting with too. You know, I've gone to some place I never expected there to be great service. It was the trash company. I moved to San Antonio a year ago, and I needed to change my account to get my trash cans. Uh-huh. And I thought I was going to call a trash company, and I was literally thinking of the Sesame Street character that lives in the trash can. I thought I was going to deal with Oscar the Grouch, right? Those people were the most professional, polite, blew me away. And I really sat with that experience for a minute and realized, well, I expected them to be grouchy people dealing with trash and the public. And they were great. And then shortly after that, within days, I was in another store where I thought I would get better service because it's more of a boutique. And man, they were just totally disinterested in my being in their shop. And I just thought, isn't that weird that my expectations were so diametrically opposite for each of those experiences. And I was surprised pleasantly in one and unpleasantly in another. And I don't think that's ever going to change. I think people will always bring that to the customer experience, of course.
It's so great that you brought up expectations and cultures, because this is a question that I've been wanting to ask you for a while now. And you've lived in so many different countries in your life and your career. You've also lived in so many different cities within the United States. And I wonder if you have noticed a difference of customer experience expectations in different geographic locations. Does someone in Ireland, do they tend to expect a different level of service than, say, somebody in Baltimore or Massachusetts or in San Antonio? Like, have you ever noticed a geographical difference? I know, you can't paint with a hugely broad brush, but is that something that you've considered throughout your travels in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, I'm going to answer your question in broad generalities, right? I mean, I know there's exceptions in every case, but to answer your question, I noticed, for example, in Ireland, which is a very nuanced culture, it's different than the United States. It's less pugnacious, right? It's less assertive or aggressive. So people will grin and bear it when they have bad customer experiences. And then I worked with a company called the CX Company, which is Ireland's premier CX consulting firm. And they do an annual report every October on the state of CX in Ireland. And one of the things that the report discusses year after year is that the Irish, as an example, generally don't change banks, right? They're like the boiling frog example. They will just get used to the bad service and expect bad service and get bad service, which is meeting expectations technically, right? And you have a very high threshold of pain before they switch providers, right? Now, again, it's a small country of 5 million or so people. So there's less competition, for example, in banking or internet service providers. But there is a different cultural aspect of Irish people that tend to have a higher threshold of pain before they switch. And in America, which is a huge market with enormous competition, there's at least a dozen options for me within a mile of where I live. And we as Americans tend to have no inhibitions about switching, right? So if I got a bad haircut, I'm looking for the next one, right? If your line is too long, I'm going somewhere else. If the service wasn't great and the food was okay, but it was expensive, I'm going to find a better value, right? Because it's out there and we know that. So culturally, this idea that there's always options for us. It's rare that there isn't in America by virtue of the scale of our economy. And of course, you mentioned regional differences. You mess up somebody's coffee order at a Dunkin' Donuts in Boston, you're going to hear about it. And if you mess up a pizza order in New York City, you're going to hear about it, right? Whereas maybe in Atlanta, they're a little less assertive about dissatisfaction or something. And that's where you have to know your customers. That's where those subtleties and nuances and customs and courtesies and traditions and those aspects of knowing your customer really have to be factored in, whether it's grocery stores or makeup or what have you. And I think it's also where a lot of companies form brand promises, like in regional banks, for example. There's a lot of little regional banks with 5 or 6 branches or so. And, they really know their customer base. They know who their business clients are, who their customers are and things like that. And they try to serve that local sort of micro market really, really well. So again, going back to your mission, vision, values and your business objectives and your brand promises, that customer awareness has to be factored into all those things.
I was reminded, as you were talking about different expectations, I used to manage a lot of Starbucks stores, and primarily in Lower Manhattan and then in Washington, D.C., and having started managing those stores in Manhattan, I sort of knew what that expectation was for my financial district customers. They don't really want to talk to you. They don't really even care if you're that friendly. They want efficiency and accuracy and consistency. When I moved to DC and started taking over some stores there was a little bit more of a relaxed feel to it. And I found that my precision, or what was probably perceived as haste, was a little too aggressive, was a little bit too abrasive for my new batch of customers. So then I sort of had to make that pivot of saying, okay, my customers here are expecting something a little bit more with a lighter touch. I'm not going to sacrifice any quality of what I'm doing, but I understand that my interpersonal interaction with them needs a little bit of a lighter touch. So as humans, we're fascinating, aren't we, in that regard?
Fascinating and infuriating at the same time. But that's a wonderful story. That's a wonderful story. And if you think at Starbucks, it's a huge enterprise, right? How do you scale that awareness and that know your customer? And that, how do you teach that to management and staff at different places? So there is a great deal of sociology with customer experience management in terms of getting to understand your customer and delivering what's valued in those markets where you serve people.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk to you, too, before we run out of time, about your incredible book, Customer Experience Management Field Guide. I love that you've called it a field guide because, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it harkens back to your military service, where a field guide provided for frontline troops the do's and don'ts, the basic information they needed to know, the useful tips, tricks of the trade. It was something that was probably carried with the troops in their packs or in their pockets, probably worn out from a lot of referencing. And I wonder if you can give us a quick snapshot of why you wrote this book and how do you intend for CX management professionals to use it?
Well, thank you. Great question. It's actually a field manual. And I think field guide is like a bird watcher who has a pocket guide with lots of pictures. But a field manual, militaries across the world use field manuals to orient soldiers on the doctrine, tactics, techniques, and procedures of a particular thing. It's sometimes very specific. Like there's field manuals on field sanitation, how to dig a toilet in the field so that you don't get disease and sickness. It's very specific about how deep to dig a hole and what to do with human waste. It's actually very specific. And then there's field manuals on the employment of nuclear weapons. And those are really interesting documents to read as well. But that's what I wanted. My vision for the book was I wanted something that was well more useful than platitudes that happy customers buy more, for example, and something much more adaptable than the dogma of you must do this and you must do that. And this is what this means all the time, everywhere. So I was looking for that middle ground of frameworks that were meaningful and were parts of a whole. That customer experience management was a actual business function that had components to it. And many of those components may exist already. And if they do, great. Then it's a matter of understanding where you are now and your capability and then maturing to do more over time. And what's missing, you might need this. So let's build that capability over time and so forth. And so the book does do that. It breaks customer experience management programs into these 8 components that holistically, I think, should exist in a CX program. And then I expected it to become this sort of dog-eared, highlighted, underlined, tabbed, desktop reference. So that, for example, if someone tasked you with coming up with a customer experience strategic plan, here's what we want to accomplish this next fiscal year. Here's our business objectives, mission, vision, values, brand promises. Develop a strategic CX plan that's going to enable these things to happen. Well, I've never done that before. Where do I start? And of course, you can go on the internet and get tons of stuff, but in my book, you can just open up to that chapter and read what I have to say and see the template that I provide and let that become a starting point for that work. And I'm not saying you have to rip the pages out and fill them in because that's the only way to do it. I'm just saying if it's something new to you or you just want some sort of expanded understanding of what could be done or how it could be done, the book is intended to provide that support. And I'm really happy. It's been out 2 years now. I'm really happy that I've gotten quite a lot of feedback from readers. In some cases, pictures of that dog-eared, highlighted, tabbed book on their desk. And it really, really makes me feel great. That to me, even if it's only 1 or 2 people that have ever used it that way, made the whole effort worthwhile.
Forgive me for misspeaking. I meant field manual, not field guide, because it's much more complex than bird watching, that's for sure. But the way in which you've broken it down to make it simple and user-friendly speaks to the experience that your customers are having with what you've written anyway. So I thank you for that. And also for our listeners, as we always do, we love to give away our guests' book. So after you've listened to this episode or watched us anywhere you get your podcast videos, if Jeff has said something today that has really sparked your imagination or really inspired you on your CX journey, quote Jeff on whatever social media platforms you're on and use the hashtag CXWise, and we will send you a copy of Jeff's book, Customer Experience Management Field Manual, because everybody needs to have it in their hands. So, Jeff, thank you so much for your wisdom, your insights, your stories, your experience. You have made us all CX wiser, and I can't thank you enough for your time with us today. Thank you, Jeff.
Well, Nathan, thanks so much for inviting me. I've enjoyed all of our conversation, and I really appreciate this opportunity to speak to your audience as well. Thank you.
Well, next time you're on, we're going to talk all about Batman and nothing else, because Jeff and I are big Batman fans, as you might see. So we kept ourselves from nerding out completely. But Jeff, thank you so much, man, and I can't wait to see you again.
All right, thanks, Nathan. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.